deficiency disease and they inject synthetic B1 into your body, it will cure you in the short term of a B1 deficiency. The challenge is in the research is that as you take B1 over an extended period of time, you actually induce a deficiency far greater than the deficiency you were trying to correct. So what that means is that synthetic vitamins have a drug-like short-term benefit in the body, but they are not built to keep us physically healthy over the extended period of our lives. So that's really where a lot of the misinformation in the supplement industry is. This is not a talk on eating a lot of meat and cheese. We're going to talk about this concept of ketosis, and the only reason we understand about ketosis is because of the amount of sugar that we're eating, and I'll give you a little bit of statistics on what that looks like. Herbs can help when we have genetic weaknesses. This is the reason why we take herbal preparations. Herbs actually bind to receptor sites in our bodies that if you had a healthy molecular expression, that your body would make those molecules bind into those receptor sites and your physiology would change from that. Herbs have been found to have molecules or phytochemicals that look like the molecules of our body. So we can take herbs to come up from the shortnesses of where our genetics may be weakened in our system. And then food choices should be weighed on their nutrient content, as we said before.
So, can we ask questions?
Absolutely.
So what is a synthetic vitamin? What's that made from, or what is it?
Yeah, that's I could have done an hour presentation on the difference between synthetic and whole food. Essentially what I would explain to you, I can connect to the drug industry. So when we look at pharmaceutical drugs in the industry, we have what are called first generation discoveries. These are molecules found from plants and other different types of organic substances that have a molecular spin that generally spin either to the left or the right. And what that means is when you shine a light into the molecule, that molecule's optical spin will either come out to a right spin or a left spin. The generic drugs that they make today have the opposite spin. So when you look at the research of the difference between taking a generic medication and a first generation, the generics have been shown to have little to no benefit in the body. So they have minor effects of what those first generation drugs were capable of doing. That's the exact same thing when it comes to a synthetic vitamin and a natural food-based vitamin. Food-based vitamins spin the dextro side, the right spin of the optical light, and synthetic vitamins spin to the left. So you'll see L-tocopherol, that's a purely synthetic form of vitamin. D-L-tocopherol means that half spins right, half spin left. So it's half natural and half synthetic. Now why that's important, when you understand the physics of biology, this is where the unique nature of science breaks down, because whenever you look into the scientific community, they're constantly trying to force upon the mind that we're here by accident. That there's nothing organization or design within us. But when they get down to that quantum level of the cell itself, the area between matter and what Einstein called spooky action at a distance, the quantum field, that there are little tiny particles within your cells called nanoparticles. They have two legs and a propeller on the top of their bodies. And what they essentially do is walk up and down your DNA, methylating your DNA. And why that's important? If your DNA expresses itself as you turn over your cells, it could potentially mutate. That's essentially what cancer is a mutation of the DNA. As these little nanoparticles walk up and down the DNA, you want them methylating that DNA. The issue is when you take a synthetic vitamin, as it spins into the receptor at the the left spin, it causes that little body inside our cells, the smallest nanoparticle we know about, to flip the propeller on the back side, spin, and then burn out. So over a short period of time, its function shuts down. But when the molecule comes in with the proper right spin, it hits the receptor, and they know this at the scientific level, this nanoparticle walks until its job is done, and then it recycles back into a new body that continues to work. So your cells work at an infinity level, where they're constantly being able to function based on how these nutrients are represented at the cellular level. And that's the difference between a synthetic and a whole food vitamin. We have to remember that these vitamins have to be put together by nature. The sun provides the photons that come down to the plant, activate photosynthesis. Within that cell, the plant makes these vitamins as a defense mechanism, antioxidant. They are only there as an immune function for the plant. We either eat the plant or we eat the animal that ate the plant. But then those organic systems use those same molecules to make those cells. It's only been since the mid-1900s that we actually even know about synthetic vitamins in regards to how to make them in a laboratory. The issue is that when industry gets behind something, if it's not there and it's standing for the benefit, and the founder of Standard Process, as he did for his entire career, Dr. Royal Lee, for the benefit of everyone in this room to have nutrients and have access to them universally throughout your life cycle. He believed that was an American right, and that it was only through the movement of different industries that pushed this agenda that synthetic vitamins had to be a part of our daily lives. And I will talk about white flour in a minute, but that's essentially what was happening. As we refined white flour in this country, we started seeing heart disease like we had never seen it before. It had not existed at the level prior to the refinement of white flour. There are people who actually travel all over China looking for people with heart disease and couldn't find them in the early 1900s. But we, as we were starting to process out the nutrients of the of the flour grain itself, we started seeing heart attacks on the rise and dramatically in this country. So it's those nutrients that actually protect us against heart disease that have been refined out. Now what happened in the 1950s is that the American Medical Association came to the white flour lobbyists and said, if you don't change something with white flour, we're going to have to make a statement against white flour. That's when they started spraying the synthetic vitamins into the white flour, so that you wouldn't have a heart attack eating the bread. It would happen hours later and you couldn't connect it to the bread itself. Or through the lifetime, you would get the development of it over time, but you wouldn't be able to connect it back to the food. So again, I understand this concept and importance of understanding that food needs to be non-perishable and we need access to it, but that doesn't mean every single one of you would understand in running your businesses. That you have to put value into your business. You have to get ROI out of your business. You have to make logical decisions to be viable in your economy. Your body is no different. If you make errors in your body, it's like making errors in your business. So that's essentially what a whole food and synthetic vitamin difference is.
So synthetic vitamins, they are not food-based, they're not plant-based, they're made from what compounds, different compounds?
They can come from an original organic compound, but what the issue is that as they're processed, they change their structure. So it's generally a heating process that alters the structure. So it's the same issue when it comes to when we hear historically about taking in raw dairy. And the issue was never that raw dairy made us sick. It was that the people who were growing the cattle weren't taking care of the grasses, they weren't taking care of the cleanliness of the animal, and then now they connected diphtheria, tuberculosis, and those different types of immune diseases to raw dairy. And that's where the science came in and said, we don't have enough regulation over this, so we need to pasteurize all of the dairy that we consume. The issue with that is that all of the health benefits that dairy provided us prior to that date were all removed. And now we are being promoted that drinking milk helps to build bones. But the issue is that the calcium that's available in the milk is not easily absorbed into the system. So if you were to drink a glass of milk versus eat spinach, you would actually increase your blood calcium better by eating the spinach than drinking the milk today. But if you go back to the time when we consumed raw milk, we actually got more calcium from the raw milk than anything. Now, I'm not a big proponent of drinking milk. I'm not asking you to go out and drink raw milk. Milk itself is not a perfect human food. There are other nutrients that you can get in your diet that raw milk provided. But the idea there is to say that once you start heating a molecule, that's what actually begins the change of the molecular spin. And that's what actually alters its structure. So as we find in nature, and I'll take your question, that once a system becomes organic, once God has kissed it, once you break that organic molecule, you can't reverse it back. Dr. Lee equated it to the concept of taking a watch, smacking it with a hammer, and then handing somebody a box full of pieces and saying, here's your watch. All the pieces are there, but it no longer functions as a watch. And that's essentially what we do when we process these vitamins.
I was going to ask what you thought of almond milk as an alternative to drinking.
My issue is not for almond milk. I have no problem with almond milk. The issue is industry adds ergocalciferol, which is vitamin D2. And if you go back to the history of understanding irradiated vitamin D2, it actually is shown to calcify the kidneys, and children are being brought to hospital regularly with kidney disease because of vitamin D2. Now, it comes back to the amount that you ingest, but there's really never been any benefit that vitamin D2 has been something that we should ingest in any sort of high quantity. It should come naturally occurring in things like mushrooms, but to then take it out of the mushroom and add it to the almond milk because you want to mimic that which is the dairy milk, which they do add vitamin D to the feed and add vitamin D back, that's really more of a marketing piece. So if you were to take raw almonds and milk them yourselves, then that would be fine. That would be fine, yes.
So the new milk that's now on the market or is coming is oats, like oat milk, I guess I haven't tried it yet, I haven't seen it, but I read about it. Is that a better source?
I went to Whole Foods and I looked at all of the different milk substitutes and every single one of them add ergocalciferol. I think why is that the federal government said if you were going to have a milk, it has to have ergocalciferol added to it.
So you better off making it yourself.
That's right. That's right. See, that's the issue. I wish that I could make it. Look, this guy right here wishes everything was convenient. I wish I didn't have to care. I used to stand in line at Chipotle and I'd get one burrito, and then I would get mad because I had to stand in line and get a second one. So I just began the habit of getting 2 burritos at one time. You know, when we ordered pizza, there was Dad's pizza and everybody else's pizza. I understand the concept of convenience. It's a struggle today to be healthy. So you can either be willfully blind to what's going on out there, or you can become an active participant in your health journey. And I would say it's very much beneficial because one of the things that's unique about the brain, as you change the way you practice your lifestyle, your brain changes with your lifestyle practices. You actually desire less of the foods you think you have to have. It becomes far easier to practice those concepts of lifestyle choices. They become a part of your subconscious. And our subconscious, or our heuristic practices of our brain, are really what we're trying to stimulate with. It doesn't mean not try these things. It says that if I start this journey, I will change my genetic expression. That's all we have to do. What else should we spend our time doing in our personal life but taking care of ourselves and our families? So I wanted to touch a little bit on longevity more than anything because you really have to ask yourself, are these things really worth doing? Because if they don't extend our lives or make our lives any better, then it's a waste of time for me to be here bothering you when you guys can be covering a lot of different, more influential things in your lives. But if we look at the definition of longevity, it essentially means the period of time an organism is expected to live under ideal circumstances. So statistically in the United States, we actually only live to the age of 79 years, and we're 31st in the world. You know, I was listening to something the other day I thought was interesting. The reason why we don't care is because we have so much money to spend on medicines and synthetic foods that we actually can prolong our lives because of this issue. But the fact that we spend more money than the next 4 countries combined in healthcare, why are we 31st in the world? That makes me angry. That's why I'm here today. I'm not selling you anything about my company or supplement line. Anything that you hear from me today is always best to go to Gil Wise's pharmacy. If you would like to talk to him about assessing your lives, your family lives, he's the best place to start. I'm here because of this. I'm here because this is aggravating. The reason, when we look at the oldest person who's ever lived, they lived to 122 years old. For those who practice spirituality and reading the Bible, it says that God made us to live 120 years. Yet we only live 80 years. We're missing out on a third of potential life. So what is it that she did that we don't do anymore? Our ancestors grew their own food, cooked with whole foods, rarely snacked. This idea of my blood sugar's down, I need a bagel, or I need a protein shake. No, I'm not anti-protein shake, but that's not what they were doing. They were not eating regularly. They engaged in physical labor. The idea of the Irish and the potato. The potato is high in vitamin C, but rich in starch. People say, well, I can't eat potatoes, it's too many carbohydrates. But if they were working in the fields all day, burning all of those calories and carbohydrates from their energy levels, replenishing themselves with the potato was a good choice. So it's this idea of working with the soil and understanding we actually have too much time to sit around and do nothing today. We can sit in relaxation. And as science shows, us men produce 2 times more serotonin than women, and women spend 2 more times dopamine, make 2 more times amounts of dopamine. This is essentially why late at night, after a long day, we can go home and turn on the television and seem content. And generally, and I speak in generalities because everything's a bell curve in life, women are up cleaning, putting things away, because they're goal-oriented and they can't calm down to that relaxation that we get. And that's essentially the difference between our 2 species. So men are better driven to the idea of setting goals as a differential off of their serotonin levels, and women are better for things like prayer, relaxation, and certain things that increase serotonin levels in the body to help balance out their dopamine levels. So when we're not engaging in those physical labors, we're not activating dopamine generally in the male species. So we're not actually out there, working with the soil and feeling great about what we've grown and eaten. We can just relax and do nothing. And that's really become the issue. People went to bed early. There's something called the circadian rhythm. This idea that when the sun comes up, you activate cortisol in your body, which wakes you. And then at night, your body actually sees the sun go down. Something called your pineal gland begins to produce melatonin, which helps you to go into deep REM sleep. We'll talk a little bit about sleep today, but if you're not sleeping well, please go seek help. Because a lot of the science shows that just sleeping well can lead to some of the healthiest genetic expression you can possibly get, even if your diet is bad. So sleeping becomes primarily important for our health. Like I said, they got up early. They ate what was considered a traditional diet. I won't get into the specifics of that, but think about this concept of offal. The idea that they would cut open the animal and all falls. They ate the offal. They ate the intestines. They ate the liver. They ate the adrenals, the heart. This idea of eating muscle meat is only something that we do today. If you go back to 2,000 years ago, the muscle meat was left for the animals. We ate the actual nutrient-dense portions of the animal tissue. They led a simple life, and they did not have electronics. If you're sitting up after 8 o'clock with a blue light in your face, you are causing your body to recognize the sun coming up at 8 o'clock at night. It's a big part of why you're not sleeping well. Why I share that with you is, remember when you were a child, when your mother came in and she tucked you into bed and you said your prayers, she kissed you on the forehead and she turned out the light and you rolled over and went to sleep. It was a ritual. It was a practice. We no longer do that. We leave the television on and fall asleep to it. And our brains, whether you know it or not, are active to that blue light even while you sleep. So if you're practicing keeping televisions on and electronics late at night, consider breaking that habit as quickly as possible, because it will cause you to have brain changes that lead to things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And I think somebody was talking earlier about trying to maintain memory. This is a big portion of that. There's dietary factors, but there's also proper sleep. There's a difference between long-term and medium memory and short-term or executive working memory. That's the memory that we want every day where we recall words. That's because our brains need to lay down proteins. But as we start having plaques, amyloid plaques, and rewiring of our neurons, our ability to pull those instantaneous memories, they go away. So we start to struggle with memory. But all we're essentially struggling with is lack of sleep and proper nutrients. So what causes aging? We're going to talk a little bit about telomere shortening. Think about a telomere as that little plastic piece on the end of your shoelace. It's what holds the weaving together of your lace. Chronological aging, we've already discussed that. We can live to 120 years if we have the proper environment, but we're living far shorter than that. So aging is a part of it. There's no idea that we're going to live forever. I'm not one of these people who believes in the singularity, or that we're going to figure out how to make our bodies live forever, or we're going to plug into a computer system. That's not the case. It just means that while we're here, we should treat our bodies like a temple. And that's the important concept there. Oxidative stress, that's really your environment. A lot of people are concerned about too much sunlight, but when we have nutrient deficiencies, that's what makes our skin receptors subjected to the damages of UVB rays. And then glycation, and we're going to talk a little bit more about sugar as we go, but that glycation concept, essentially think about it as the caramelization process. When you put sugar in the presence of milk and then you cook it, the heating process causes a browning, caramelization. That's essentially what's happening when we have too much sugar in our bloodstream. It binds to proteins, and we'll talk about what that marker looks like when it comes to your blood values. So when we look at what a healthy lifestyle in the 21st century looks like, this is actually a study that came out of Harvard University. And they studied these 5 areas, and they found that if you were able to address these 5 areas, that it actually impacted how long you live. So first and foremost is a healthy diet. So the intake of healthy foods like vegetables and fruits. I will say this, I know there's a desire to eat a bunch of fruit when you see this because fruit is good. I get that, but fruit is full of fructose. Why I share that with you is that if you think that from all of this I'll just go eat a bunch of fruit, fructose is the plant sugar in fruit. Your liver has to handle 100% of that. If you already are struggling with liver function, what is called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, eating more fruit can actually be detrimental. So when you see something like this, think about 2 times vegetables to 1 fruit. So if you're going to feel like you want to eat a lot of fruit, make sure you get your vegetables. I would also ask you that look at what's called a glycemic index. That will tell you which fruits are lower, and you want them to be lower on the glycemic index, which means how much sugar is in your bloodstream. That's strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries. The berries are very low on the glycemic load. So your body will not produce a lot of insulin in response to that. We can have nuts, but I don't want you to leave here thinking I'll just eat nuts all the time. They're very high in calories, so you're thinking about a handful of nuts a day. That's really the maximum, unless they're the primary part of your diet. Whole grains. We just got finished talking about white flour, and I'll show you why that's a challenge. But the idea here is that whole grains should be freshly pulled from the soil and either defatted, and now you're getting none of the fat and vitamin E benefits of what's called wheat germ oil, but you get the B vitamin nutrients and minerals from the actual berry itself to make your own bread. But if you don't, whole grains have 4 times more pesticides sprayed on them than white flour. Pesticides have been shown to have more detrimental effects at your DNA level in causing cancer than anything else. They're actually finding now that glycophosphates are found in algae in Antarctica.
Why do whole grains everywhere?
Because the bugs still want to eat the whole grains. If you guys ever want to do a test on the difference between a whole food and a synthetic food, take a stick of butter and put it outside, and right next to it put a stick of margarine. That margarine will be there 5 years from now untouched. It's the same reason why the bugs don't want the white flour, but want to eat the whole wheat flour. That's the reason why they have to spray so much more pesticides on them.
Can you go back one slide?
Sure.
Because I wanted to take a picture of it, and I missed it. Sorry.
Just let me know how we're doing on time, because I have a tendency I can run over. Healthy fats.
On the fruits again, you said there was some fruits that have less fructose than others, and they're better than others. Repeat that again. And what were the ones?
The ones you don't want to eat are things like watermelon, honeydew.
You don't want to eat watermelon?
You don't want to eat watermelon or honeydew. You don't want to eat pineapples. And the reason why we like them is because they're so much higher in fructose, because they're sweet.
Watermelon, honeydew, and what else? What was the other one?
Pineapple.
Pineapple.
Pineapple?
The better ones would be the berries, blueberries, strawberries,
Pears,
pears.
green apples, not red apples, but the green apples. And those
Okay.
are the ones that are lower glycemic. Now you can get a list of GI, low glycemic index fruits. I would say try to stay on the lower glycemic. And if you go home and say, I'm going to eat strawberries all the time, I'm happy with that. But to help you on one more stage, which I have to do, is that strawberries are number 1 on what is known as the dirty dozen list, meaning that they have more pesticides on them exposure-wise to any other fruit. You have to eat organic. I'm sorry. This is a time when eating organic becomes so much more important. One of the unique things about eating organic though, you end up eating less. Your brain wants nutrients. When you eat organic nutrients, your brain says, thank you, I don't need any more. But when you eat synthetic foods and devitalized nutrients, your brain says, go back. Go back. Now it does that from a unique concept of what's called your gut microbiome and the chemicals that it releases to signal the brain what it wants more of. So if you eat a hamburger, your body begins to make bacteria that release chemicals that send signals to your brain to eat more of that food, or add French fries in a milkshake. So you need to feel as though when you choose to eat organic, it's not just that it's more expensive, it's that you'll actually eat less. Healthy fats become hyper important here. This means non-oxidized fats. So we want to get things like avocado, which it's very small amounts of fat, but you can get raw nuts for good fats. But cooking with things like sesame seed oil, olive oil, and coconut oil. I don't handle coconut oil well. My genetics don't allow me. I get very sick on MCT oil or coconut oil. But I love olive oil and sesame seed oil. And they have what's called a higher smoke point, which means you can cook with these oils.
You said MCT oil?
Is good, as long as your body can digest it and manage it. See, the thing about it is that people don't understand about coconut oil. We understand there's health benefits there, but think about where in the world coconuts grow. And think about the people who actually had to adapt to eating coconuts as a primary food. They handle coconuts perfectly well. But if you go into Alaska and you look at the natives of Alaska, the Eskimo, they ate well blubber for their fat content. So they had both died of different types of diseases, but they still had longevity factors based on where they lived in the world and the types of foods they ate. I'm from northern European descent. There's no coconuts in northern Europe. So my body does not adapt well to eating coconut. If yours does, there are beautiful health benefits with coconut oil.
Coconut water, all good?
Again, the issue with coconut water is that you have to look at the sugar content. We're going to talk a lot more about carbohydrates, but you have to become cognizant of not drinking sugar. That's the easiest. Just to touch on that concept, the study that was shown coming out of Penn State University showed that if you put a bowl of soup in front of test subjects and put a tube in the bottom of that bowl, as they were eating the soup, they would talk and have conversation. They didn't know they were being a part of a study. After, they would fill out a survey. How much soup did you eat? I had a bowl. What they didn't know is at that time they were feeding soup into the bowl and they ate the equivalent of 2.5 bowls of soup. So you have to make positive decisions on the front end of your food choices because we unconsciously eat too much of the wrong thing. So when coconut water comes along and has high sugar content, we might get way too much sugar, let alone do we even need that sugar at all. So this is what they did in looking at these molecules under a microscope, where they essentially took a molecule and added a special chemical to it, and then they could see the structure of these molecules. This is purified ascorbic acid. This is the synthetic, or what is known by this government as vitamin C. But as you can see, it's just the antioxidant shell of what natural vitamin C from things like oranges, greens, those different foods that provide us vitamin C in nature. You can see the complexity that, I mean, the eye of God as far as I'm concerned. I mean, this is brilliance of nature.
That's good.
Now you pasteurize it, you heat it, and this is what starts to alter the molecular structure of that substance. Then we have a popular orange drink. This one went to space. Does anybody know what that is?
Tang.
That's Tang. This is what we think our astronauts need for optimal health. This is the reason why we're struggling to go to Mars. The human body needs this Earth. It needs the nutrients from this Earth, and we can't replicate those nutrients in space. The fear is we'll get to Mars and we'll be growing food like this, and people will die quickly. And we as a society will not do well to know that we sent thousands of people to Mars, and within a year they're all dead. That will be one of the biggest tragedies that we can imagine in space travel. Then we have commercial white flour. as all of the nutrients have been removed. This is the reason why I hate to tell you, a life without bread is a longer life. And then as we talked about before, whole wheat flour still has some of those nutrients, and the reason why they have to spray so many pesticides, because the bugs still want to eat this part of that molecule.
When you say no bread of, that have all the seeds and everything else in it, no bread period?
Remember what we talked about in the beginning? I'm going to share some truths that are going to make people uncomfortable.
And then that orange juice, is that like fresh squeezed orange juice that loses its nutrients?
That's generally pasteurized orange juice that you find at the grocery store.
Pasteurized orange juice, not fresh squeezed.
You're making your fresh orange juice. Now, the one thing I can tell you is orange juice is high in fructose. How many oranges would you eat in a day? I'm just asking.
How many?
How many oranges would you eat in a day?
A lot.
Two's a fair. 2 to 3 is a fair. 8 ounces is 6 oranges.
Okay.
So people are drinking way too much orange juice.
Right.
Now they're being advised by their medical doctor for potassium levels, but you get potassium from greens. You don't have to have it from orange juice. And the beautiful thing about things like Vitamixes and NutriBullets is you can put those greens and you can make them into a drink now where you don't have to eat all of that vegetable all the time.
So what you're saying is eat the orange and drink water?
That's right.
There you go.
Now, I will tell you, when it comes to drinking water, I'm not adamant about people only drinking just water, although I am a fan of the concept. The issue with water is a longer story here, which I could clear an hour on too as well, I apologize. But what I want to say is that there was a study done at the academic level that showed why our senses are attracted to the different things that we ingest. And what they found is it's actually the carbonation in soda hitting the back of our throat that we're actually addicted to. So if you think that you like soda, let it go flat and warm, and then drink that, and then we can have a conversation that you actually like soda. So if you're a soda drinker, you're actually more addicted to the bubbles hitting the back of your throat than you are to soda. So things like Pellegrino and Perrier are great transitions out of the soda industry and maintaining that enjoyment factor of your drink.
And while you're on water, is there any particular bottled water that spring water?
Mountain
that's
Valley.
better than, huh?
Mountain Valley is the best brand at the grocery store. It's
Yeah.
glass bottled.
That ain't good?
Um,
But I hear certain spring water actually has chlorine stuff in it.
Yeah.
But
This is not a talk on fluoride, but they've tested every bottled water out there, and they all have fluoride in them. And it's not calcium
Mountain
fluoride.
Valley.
Mountain Valley is the cleanest I can give you over the counter. If you're looking for something quick at a convenience store, Evian is probably next best. And so Fiji might be a third at that point, but Evian has been shown to have the richest amount of minerals. Anything that's distilled is cooked. So what that means is as you cook the water, it pulls minerals from your body. Water wants to reconstitute itself. It's essentially trying to get into our bodies, get into our cells, and hydrate us. But how it gets into the cells is through minerals. So if we drink distilled water, we have to rob minerals from our bodies to make that water available to our cells.